The Haywain. Bosch's Haywain Triptych is dated to around 1516, once again established by means of dendrochronological research. The panel painting forms part of a group of 6 acquired by King Philip II of Spain in 1570 and shipped to El Escorial 4 years later. It was later sold to the Marquess of Salamanca and divided into 3 paintings. In 1848, the central panel was bought by Isabella II of Spain and brought to Aranjuez, when the right panel was returned to Escorial and the left went to the Prado. The triptych was finally recomposed in 1914 in the latter museum. Unlike in other Bosch triptychs, the closed shutters are painted in full colors instead of grisaille, representing a version of the artist's famous Wayfarer image, surrounded by a series of miniatures, including the robbery of another wayfarer and a hanged man. The wayfarer uses a stick to repel a dog, adding to much speculation as to its intended meaning. Some commentators have suggested that the figure may represent a man that follows his road in spite of the temptation of sins, such as lust, symbolized by the 2 dancing shepherds, and the evil acts occurring around him. The triptych adheres to a similar narrative structure as seen previously in the Garden of Earthly Delights. The top section of the left panel portrays the rebel angels being cast out of heaven as God sits enthroned, while the angels are transformed into insects. Below this, God creates Eve from the rib of Adam, followed by Adam and Eve discovering the serpent and the tree of knowledge in Eden. Temptingly, the serpent offers them the forbidden fruit. In the lower section of the panel, St. Michael forces Adam and Eve out of Eden. Adam speaks with the angel. Eve, in a melancholic pose, looks ahead to the right, fixed on the uncertain future ahead. The central panel features a large wagon of hay surrounded by a multitude of fools engaged in a variety of sins, distinctly different from the sins of lust that dominate the Garden of Earthly Delights. Bosch positions Christ in the sky, and an angel on top of the wagon looks up to him, praying, though the figures below are unaware of Christ looking down upon the world. The Haywain is being drawn by infernal beings, appearing to drag the sinners onto hell. The cart appears to move to the right, emphasized by the direction of the bowing sinners, leading the viewer onto the final panel and the torturous realms of hell. The procession on the left side of this panel bends back into the middle ground, but the right side figures continue in a straight line with the wagon, suggesting a more evident progress into damnation. Hell teems with strange beasts, delineated as anthropomorphic figures, inflicting pain and suffering on the human sinners. A giant fish-like creature with human legs instead of a tail feasts upon the torso of one figure, while wild dogs set upon another. In the sky above, a haunting tower surrounded by blood-red smoke is manned by monstrous figures, while the lone body of a hanged man catches our attention as a black silhouette. An eerie figure floats witch-like above the carnage, holding a long weapon over its shoulder. A medieval viewer of the painting would be alerted at once to the manifold consequences of leading a sinful life. Hermit saints. Dating from circa 1493, confirmed by dendrochronologic analysis, Hermit saints was completed towards the middle of Bosch's career. Some art historians believe that it is the most important production during the artist's stay in Venice. In the triptych, he enlarges the view of the landscape, seeking to capture innovative atmospheric effects. The painting features the typical bizarre and surreal apparitions that are such a distinctive feature of the artist's works. Each of the three panels portrays a different Christian anchorite saint, all three saints reflecting the monastic ideal, a life spent in mortification of the flesh and in continuous prayer and meditation. The central panel depicts Saint Jerome kneeling in the desert and praying by a crucifix on a stick in a setting of an altar, similar to a sculpted Roman sarcophagus located within a ruined oratory. Reliefs in the stonework illustrate scenes concerning the theme of redemption theme, such as Judith and Holofernes, symbolizing the victory of the soul, as well as a knight and a unicorn, functioning as a symbol of virginity. In the lower section of the panel, a man dives into a beehive, covering himself with honey, offering a statement on carnal love. The scene is dominated by symbols of evil, scattered in a desert and dark landscape and surrounded by sinister vegetation. They include skeletons, monstrous animals, and deadened plants. The left panel concerns Saint Anthony the Abbot in a nocturnal landscape. The village on fire might be an allegory of the ergotism plague, or of the saint's alleged capability to quench fires. He collects the marshy water out of a pool with a jar, surrounded by demonic visions, such as the naked woman appearing behind a tent in the company of several devils. Below her, a devilfish pours wine from a jar, while deformed crickets are portrayed in grotesque postures. One is reading a missal, another has a prolonged beak and a peacock tail, while another is composed by a nun's head with feet, carrying a little owl and its nest above. The right panel shows St. Giles praying in a grotto, which contains a roll that, according to the Golden Legend, lists all the names of those to be saved due to his intercession. The saint has been shot by an arrow, originally destined for the fawn at his feet, relating to the time he was shot accidentally by a passing hunter. The landscape, the least dark in the triptych, is nevertheless dominated by a sharp rock. The triptych is housed at the Gallery dell'Accademia, Venice. It was first mentioned at the Palazzo Ducale in 1771 as hanging in the Eccelso Tribunale Hall. In 1838 it was removed by the Austrian authorities, then ruling Venice, to the Imperial Gallery of Vienna in Austria, from which in 1893 it went to the Kunsthistorisches Museum. Yet in 1919 it was returned to Venice. The triptych has been badly damaged, possibly by a fire, in particular in the central part, causing someone to repaint the sky, landscape, and head of St. Jerome at some time in its history. The Conjurer, circa 1502. There are 5 versions of The Conjurer and 1 engraving. Though most experts agree the most reliable painting forms part of the collection of the Musée Municipal in Saint-Germain-en-Laye, which is kept locked in a safe and loaned out on a limited basis for special exhibitions. On 1st December 1978, the painting was stolen from the museum and returned on 2nd February 1979. It was bequeathed by Louis Alexandre du Castel, a notary at Saint-Germain-en-Laye from 1813, who was also city council member and mayor in August 1835 and 1839. The collection seems especially to have been formed by his father, John Alexander du Castel, a painter and collector. The theme of the painting concerns how people are fooled by a lack of alertness and their own naivety. The figure of the conjurer on the right captures the attention of a diverse audience with a game of cups and balls. At once we are drawn to the central character, a man of rank in the forefront, who leans in and is fixed on the pearl in the conjurer's hand, while unaware of being robbed of his purse by the conjurer's accomplice behind him. Bosch associates the conjurer as a common criminal, luring in the prey. The foolish look on the rich man's face adds to the sense of his vulnerability. As in many of Bosch's works, animals are used to symbolize human traits such as deception and victimization. The little owl in the basket by the conjurer's waist represents his intelligence and deviousness. Frogs jumping out of the mouth of the central character represent the extent to which the victim renounces reason and gives in to bestial impulses. The child engrossed in watching the victim being robbed exemplifies the Flemish proverb, "He who lets himself be fooled by conjuring tricks loses his money and becomes the laughing stock of children." Another Flemish proverb, published and widely distributed circa 1480 in Es Hertogenbosch warns, "No one is so much a fool as a willful fool." The Last Judgment. Created after 1482, this imposing triptych currently resides at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, Austria. The composition shares similarities with the Haywain Triptych, once again detailing the Garden of Eden in the left panel, hell on the right, and the central panel portrays the Last Judgment. The shutters are externally painted in grisaille, depicting 2 saints, with St. James in pilgrimage on the left and right shows St. Bavo, the patron of Flanders, donating to the poor with his hawk on his left wrist. The left panel reveals the Garden of Eden of Genesis as a green landscape in the lower 3 quarters. In the upper section, God sits on his throne surrounded by a luminous halo. Around him is a cloudy sky with angels fighting rebellious angels who are turning into devils as they fall. Below this, a narrative sequence is formed, reading from bottom to middle. God creating Eve from Adam's rib, with Adam sleeping at her feet. The serpent tempting Eve and the tree of knowledge, and culminating with Adam and Eve expelled from the garden by Saint Michael, who wields his sword amidst a dark forest. The inclusion of the fall of Adam and Eve in a representation of the Last Judgment is unusual, as generally heaven and hell were allotted the chief role in the eschatological drama. Of Revelation, Christ sits above as judge, surrounded by the Virgin Mary, John the Evangelist and the Apostles. The celestial zone, painted in vivid bright blue, contrasts with the rest of the panel, which is dominated by the earthy, dark brown punishment of the damned, while the blessed occupy only a small section. Punishments for the sinners are represented as monstrous creatures of hell. The sinners are burned, speared, impaled, hung from butcher hooks, forced to eat impure food, or victimized by the cogs of horrifying machines. The wide valley dominating the central panel may represent the valley of Jehoshaphat, which, on the basis of several Old Testament references, was traditionally thought to be the site of the Last Judgment, with the walls of the earthly Jerusalem on fire in the background. Earth has become indistinguishable from hell, depicted on the right wing, as the army of Satan swarms to attack the damned and an eternity of torment commences. Satan, in the center, receives the damned souls, while the avaricious are boiled in the great cauldron just visible beneath one of the buildings. Nearby, a glutton sinner is forced to drink from a barrel held by two devils. The lascivious woman on the roof above is seduced by a lizard-like monster that slithers across her loins, while being serenaded by two musical demons. On the cliffs to the right, across the river, blacksmith devils hammer other victims on anvils, and one is being shod like a horse. The triptych is renowned for Bosch's original depictions of hell and its horrors. Many bizarre fusions of animal and human elements, sometimes combined with inanimate objects, populate the maddened scene. Disembodied heads scuttle about on stubby limbs, while others possess bodies and limbs that glow in the darkness. The oldest record of the triptych is in a 1659 inventory of Archduke Leopold Wilhelm of Austria's collection. In the late 18th century, the work was acquired by Count Lambert Spritzenstein, from whom it later went to the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna. Some art historians believe it was acquired by Philip the Fond of Castile in 1504, though others deny this. The Temptation of Saint Anthony. The Temptation of Saint Anthony was a popular subject in Renaissance art, and Bosch's handling of the subject dates from around 1501. It tells the story of the spiritual and mental torments endured by Saint Anthony the Great, Anthony Abbot, one of the most prominent of the Desert Fathers of Egypt in the late 3rd and early 4th centuries. According to some historians, The triptych could be one of the 3 temptations recorded in the inventory of Philip II of Spain, transferred to the Escorial in 1574. However, it is now considered more likely that it was instead bought by the Portuguese humanist Damião de Góis between 1523 and 1545. The painting was documented as part of the collections in the Royal Palace of Lisbon in the mid-19th century, and in 1911 King Manuel II donated it to its current museum, the Museu Nacional de Arte Antiga in Lisbon. The painting is inspired by events related in the life of Saint Anthony by Athanasius of Alexandria, which was made famous in Flanders by Peter van Os and Jacopo da Varazze's Golden Legend. The left panel portrays the legendary flight and fall of the saint. In the sky, Saint Anthony is brought down by a host of demons. Below is the saint's grotto, likened to a brothel, carved within a hill in the shape of a man on all fours, his backside forming an entrance. An impious procession is directed towards this entry, led by a deer and a demon in holy vestments. In the foreground, Anthony appears weakened as he is supported after the fall by a monk and a layman. The latter has been traditionally identified as a self-portrait of Bosch. Beneath the bridge are 3 figures, one of which is a monk reading a letter. Also on the icy lake there is a demon bird with skates, its beak holding a cartouche with the word fat, most likely a reference to the simony scandal. The central panel concerns the saint's refusal of temptation, depicting Anthony in contemplation, with a blessing hand pointing at his small cell inside a ruined tower, where a miniature Christ appears to point at the crucifix, suggesting the true sacrifice. A black-skinned priestess holds a vessel with a toad, a symbol of witchcraft as well as of luxury. A black-dressed singer with a pig face and a little owl, an allegory of heresy above his head, can be seen, while a crippled man is going to receive the communion. The saint looks out into the world, pointing in the direction of Christ. Importantly, none of the people look in the saint's direction. The right panel depicts the contemplation of Saint Anthony. The 2 figures riding the fish in the sky relate to a legend, which tells how they obtained the capability to fly by the devil in order to partake in witches' sabbaths. In the foreground, a naked woman, another symbol of luxury, peeps from a hollow trunk through a tent, which is being kept open for her by a toad. Her tempting body is being offered to the saint, portrayed to the right, looking directly at the viewer, a look of contemplation on his face. The dwarf next to him, who wears a red mantle and a whirligig, serves as a symbol of humanity's fecklessness. In the foreground, we can see the last temptations, a table with bread and a jar of wine, supported by naked demons. One of the human pillars has his foot caught in a jar, most likely an allusion to a sexual act. As customarily found in Bosch's triptychs, the exteriors of the shutters are painted in grisaille. Traditionally, artworks in churches were covered and altarpieces with wings were closed the week before Easter. The subdued coloration and the subject matter of the shutter exteriors of this triptych are in keeping with the Lenten theme. The left panel concerns the arrest of Christ, including in the foreground St. Peter cutting Malchus's ear, and in the background, soldiers surround the fallen Christ. To the left, Judas flees after his kiss. The right panel portrays Christ carrying the cross in the background, while the foreground depicts the two thieves, one confessing and the other refusing to convert. The crowd around Christ includes the figure of Simon of Cyrene, who supports the cross. In later years, Bosch was clearly preoccupied with themes of torment and the sinfulness of man, replacing his earlier, more optimistic visions of Christ and the Virgin with themes of anxiety and guilt. His sources for these unusual images came from the dark corners of the medieval imagination, introducing forms such as gargoyles and monsters of cathedral decoration, as well as ideas from the marginal illustrations of books and popular prints. The Temptation of St. Anthony epitomizes the major themes that we encounter in Bosch's art. The spectacle of sin and folly and the shifting horrors of hell are strikingly contrasted with the suffering of Christ, while Anthony stands firm in his faith against the assaults of evil. To contemporary men and women who feared the imminent appearance of the Antichrist and the Last Judgment, the serene countenance of the saint, looking at us from his haunted chapel, must have offered hope and reassurance in a troubling world. As with many of Bosch's paintings, the triptych was the subject of a number of copies. Another version of the central panel is found in MASP in São Paulo, while a copy by a follower of Bosch is housed in the National Gallery of Canada in Ottawa, while yet another version is in the Prado Museum in Madrid. A third copy, once believed to be the original but now identified as a 16th century copy, is owned by the Barnes Foundation near Philadelphia, USA.